Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of CRE Exchange. I'm Cole Perry, your host and senior market analyst here at Altus Group, a leading provider of asset and fund intelligence. I'm joined by Omar Eltarai, our U.S. Director of Research, and we're excited to have a special guest interview today. We're joined by Conrad Madsen, a co-founder and partner at Paladin Partners out of Dallas. So Conrad has represented some of the largest corporations and institutional players in the space, with over 60 million square feet transacted in over 150 cities. He specializes in industrial tenant representation, development leasing, investment and corporate services consulting, and advises clients worldwide on forecasting market conditions and trends. Beyond what's already been an impressive career in CRE, he's been recognized as a commercial real estate influencer, inducted as a Texas icon in commercial real estate by RED News, and is very active with supporting several charities through the Paladin Partners Foundation and his company's Give Back business model. So Conrad, welcome, and it's very good to have you on with us. Omar, how about you take us and kick us off?
Fantastic. Conrad, really great to speak with you again. From a walk-on as a Red Raider at Texas Tech to nearly a decade at Lee & Associates to founding Paladin Partners in 2014, you've really had a quite distinctive career and career path, one which I think is quite Texan, not only in location but also style. So, what drew you to commercial real estate in the first place?
By the way, that was an unbelievable intro. I don't think anybody else done anything quite that over the top. I don't think I'm any of those things that you guys said, but I appreciate all the kind remarks. What led me to real estate? A couple things. My grandmother was in residential real estate growing up, so I kind of always saw her showing homes, selling land to developers, things of that nature. So it kind of was around, that was my first really introduction into being around real estate, was just being around my grandmother. And God bless her, I think she sold real estate till she was about 85 or so. She's still with us today, and I think she's 93 or 94. So she had a long career, in the residential side of things. Don't know if I think it was one of those kids, out of college that really didn't know what he wanted to do in the real world. Took me a little time before I kind of found my way, which, I tell a lot of young kids, now that are in college, I'm like, hey, it's okay if you don't really know where you're supposed to be headed. Just get out there and experience the world, and you'll kind of figure out your way. And that's kind of how I got into commercial real estate. I moved to Dallas. I was born and raised in a very small town in Deep South Texas. And then after graduation, I moved to Dallas, and I was a recruiter or a headhunter for about 3 years, which taught me tremendous phone skills. I was making 150 phone calls a day and learned all about what a cold call was. Like, growing up in a small town, I had no idea what that was, right? And I just so happened to live in an apartment complex that was connected to an office building in Dallas-Fort Worth, one of the first mixed-use developments called Addison Circle. And they shared a gym. And every day, in my 20s, I was a little slimmer than I am now. I was living in the gym. And that just so happened to be where Roger Staubach's corporate headquarters was of the Staubach Company, was in that office building. And so I saw all these brokers at the Staubach Company in the gym every single day. I just saw, it just oozed success, the way they carried themselves, the way they dressed. I even saw Roger a few times, in the gym, and, I had to pick my jaw up off the floor because back in my day, he was kind of the equivalent to, Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes today, right? Captain America, was the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys in the 70s. And so, but seeing those brokers, seeing them, that was what piqued my interest in the industry. Asked one of the brokers out to lunch, afterwards they took me up to their offices, passed me up and down the hallway, and the gentleman that was there gave me time. And the gentleman's name's Tom McCarthy, and I actually ran into Tom yesterday at the NAIOP event, gave him a big hug. And, Tom gave me time and he gave me advice, and he didn't know me from Adam, but by him kind of helping point me in the right direction of breaking into this industry, here I am 23 years later and, have a career that I probably never really dreamed of as a kid from just small town South Texas. But that's how I got. That's how it all got started.
I love that. Once you got started, what were some of the big milestones that you can share once you were already in the industry?
Yeah. Well, I think listen. What's funny is first couple years are always tough for any commercial real estate broker. I mean, rarely do you come in and have immediate success. It's a long sales cycle. There's a lot of relationships that are built over years or decades, to gain, clients, whether that's on the tenant rep side or, representing landlords or doing capital markets transactions, don't happen overnight. I tell you, the one thing that I grew up with was just like, I understood the value of like hard work and that work ethic that I think is learned sometimes in a lot of small towns, honestly, because it's a lot of blue collar people, working on farms and ranches and things of that nature, and life is challenging, and so I tried to take that same approach, through my sports career and just kind of growing up where I did, just going all in on commercial real estate and working long days, long hours. Back in those days, you kind of had to come in to the office physically to get anything done. And so I'd be up there on the weekends, and just getting after it, turning over rocks and knocking on a lot of doors and making a lot of phone calls. And over time, you finally, it's a numbers game, and you'll get lucky enough and deals will happen. And so that's what happened over time. You start off with smaller deals, and then those progressed to 100,000 square foot deals, and then I remember when I did my first deal like over 400,000 square feet, I was like, man, like this is real, and then you start seeing those commissions that you can earn, and you're like, boy, this can be a lucrative business, and so, I would tell you that it wasn't something that was just instant success. There was a lot of losing, but I love to use this phrase even today. It's like, you don't sharpen your sword by winning, right? You sharpen your sword by losing. And so, all those losses that added up over the years made me a better broker, better person, and allowed me to continue to grow. And I think that's the most important part about life in general, is you just got to keep growing every single day, and put yourself in uncomfortable situations, and you'll eventually be comfortable in those situations.
And it seems like so that persistence and that growth has accumulated to you being able to claim the, to show having transacted over 60 million square feet in over 150 cities across the globe. And despite those are very impressive stats, but you also have an enormous presence in the industrial market in Texas. So is there any particular reason why Texas and why industrial?
Well, it's interesting how I got into the industrial space, and I love to tell this story because, one, I wasn't born and raised here in Dallas, right? So I had zero network here. And I felt when I had interviewed at a lot of different firms, office was the darling back in those days, and those were where the big fees were, and users were taking, huge blocks of space and all those things. But I just didn't feel like, as a guy who kind of grew up blue collar, it was too hoity-toity for me, if you will, right? And the industrial world just seemed a little more like my people that I grew up around. And so that's kind of how I kind of stumbled in the industrial world. And then, what's interesting, probably until the last, I don't know, 5 to 7 years, industrial's kind of always been, the ugly duckling. Let's be honest, right? Like it's a square box. There's nothing fancy about it. There's not a lot of them that look super beautiful, right? But over time, with the advent of e-commerce, and now we have this trend of moving manufacturing out of China and the Far East back to the States, it's gone from the ugly duckling to the white swan. It's probably the most in-demand asset class out there, other than at this current time, data centers are bursting at the seams. But, industrial has now become, one of the most sought after asset class for all the institutional capital out there, and I would have never dreamed that 10, 15 years ago, and now all the kids that are coming out of college, and they want to get in the industry, and they sit there and across from me and they go, man, I really want to get industrial. I'm like, this was never, like 10 years ago, I never talked to kids that go, man, industrial is where I want to be, right? Well, think about it, all the kids right now that are getting out of school, I mean, they've bought everything on their phone, right? They don't really go to the malls anymore, like I did as a kid to go to Foot Locker to go get my new sneakers, I mean, they order them online, they don't like them, they do the shipping return label and they ship them back, right? So like kids understand now that are coming out of college, like, industrial is kind of where it's at and where it's growing, because they know that those shoes or shirts or whatever the product was got to them from a warehouse somewhere.
That makes total sense. And I think that's absolutely like that's a trend that has been happening, but no real signs of like any sort of slowing. But
and let me hit on a little bit more about Texas and DFW. Why Texas? And I could spend an hour on this, but I'll hit the high notes, right? I mean, central time zone, no state income tax, center of the whole United States, cheaper labor, less, restriction, government restrictions here to set up businesses, and so on and so forth. And from an industrial perspective, all the logistics hubs come here, right? All the railroads come here, all of our airports that are, I think DFW is number 2 in the world, busiest airport. All the interstates, I-35 that runs from north to south of the middle of the United States, and then I-20, which kind of connects the whole east and west coast, runs right through here. Intermodal yards. I mean, all those factors make Dallas such a hub for logistics. And, our inventory now is approaching, or is that close to, in the next quarter, will be about 1 billion square feet of industrial space in Dallas-Fort Worth, right? Well, you look at Houston, and Houston only has like 500,000 from a population perspective, is only slightly smaller than DFW. And it's even a port city, which typically drives a lot of industrial. And Houston has 600 million square feet of inventory, and Dallas-Fort Worth has 1 billion, right? So it shows you, just because of those railroads, interstates, its location, all those things, from a logistics perspective, it just makes all the sense in the world. The other thing that's, what's interesting is the year-end numbers just came out. And if you talk to most people in 23, everybody was kind of down, like just not a good year, there's just like a black cloud kind of hanging over everybody, I mean, what's it going to be? Did we overbuild again? I mean, where are rates going? All those type of things. And the numbers just came out and we had another crush. We had 9 million square feet of positive net absorption in the fourth quarter to put us at 31 million for the year, which was the third best all time other than the two previous years. So it even surpassed what we were doing pre-pandemic, right? So that just shows you, even in a year where everybody was just kind of like, man, the tenant demand isn't quite there, the e-commerce boom and really the manufacturing boom is real. Almost a 1.5 million square foot speculative building in South Dallas got leased to a Chinese solar company, right? They're going to build a $200 million solar manufacturing facility. Well, guess what? Now every supplier or customer of those guys is now going and gobbling up space all around them, right? And so it's those continued influx of companies that continue to look to Texas because of all the economic benefits of it, cost of doing business, and labor, and all those other things that I mentioned earlier. That just continues to come here. And then beyond that, we're on Mexico's front doorstep. So you everything that's not coming to the States from a manufacturing perspective, if it's cheaper goods, now it's going to Mexico. And Mexico now is cheaper from a labor rate perspective than China because of their aging workforce population in China. And then you get rid of the problem of going across the whole Pacific Ocean and then sitting outside of a port for 90 days to unload. I mean, from these Mexican border towns, and call it 7 to 10 hours, those guys in a day's truck drive can be to Dallas-Fort Worth to put it into a distribution center and then on to their final customer. So, we saw the pinches of the supply chain problem that happened during COVID, and corporate America has now, we're seeing it's shifting that manufacturing back to the U.S. and or Mexico, and we're on the front doorstep of it.
So, Conrad, I think we've got a few questions later in the podcast for you about industrial trends, but that was a fantastic overview. I think, we heard a little bit about you, about what you do. You have any interest in giving us an overview of what Paladin does and kind of why you thought about starting your own brokerage?
For sure. Paladin is what I like to say, just all things, at least now. We're hopeful to open, some other divisions over time, but right now, we're just all things industrial, right? So whether it's representing tenants, whether it's representing landlords, whether it's, doing capital markets transactions of buildings, whether it's land assemblages for some of the institutional capital partners, it's all those things. Anything that touches industrial, we try to be involved in. We're real big on, kind of being street brokers, right? And understanding sub-markets. Every single guy in our office specializes in a particular area of DFW, and they learn that market cold, and so a variety of opportunities will come available, right? Whether it's representing those tenants, those landlords, selling maybe a capital markets transaction, selling land, all those things. But try to, I've always used the phrase experts earn more. And in DFW, you have to be hyper-focused because it's so competitive here. In a smaller tertiary town like, upstate New York, where you guys are in New York City, but upstate New York or out in West Texas, right? You can do a little bit of everything. But when you're in a big metro like Dallas, not only do you got to specialize in an asset class, you got to specialize in a certain area of town, or you'll just get crushed.
Is there anything other than the local specialization that you would say differentiates Paladin from its peers?
I think I've always, my biggest deal is going above and beyond for clients, right? Like we own this company. So to me, I'm looking at the long game, not just chasing single transactions. I want to do jobs that blow the doors off of clients. So they're like, man, where else can these guys help us? And that's kind of how I got all my exposure on national business, was doing a great job locally. And then I just asked the question, well, where else can I help you? Oh, you do stuff outside of Dallas. Well, oh, we got a facility in Chicago, New Jersey, and LA. And that's just, how it grew to where I did deals, all across the globe, really. And, but, also going back to why do you start Paladin, I think this variety of factors, you get exposure to different brokerage firms, and you talk to enough people, and you kind of take, okay, these guys did this well, and these guys did this well. They don't really do this well. They don't do this well. Like, I think we can build a better system here, right? And if we do all those things, we can win more business. And, I was always, I got passionate, about kind of the foundation and give back platform over the last decade. And I wanted to incorporate that, into our business plan. So, we give a percentage out of every single transaction we do, back to different charitable partners, as part of our give back. And, quite frankly, that just cannot occur at a lot of other firms, right? Like they're just, no, we need that capital for that's for stock, like we got to have our stock price up as high as possible. We got too many mouths to feed, or whatever the case may be, right? And so to me, that was big on starting Paladin, so that we could create a kind of culture of giving and wanting to help others. And that permeates the organization. I mean, if you probably ask any of our brokers, what Paladin is about today, they'd probably tell you we're in business to impact other people's lives. And that's the truth.
Fantastic. The give back model is fascinating, and I think it's quite inspiring as well. Would you speak to the Paladin Partners Foundation?
Yeah. So, so we started, the foundation a few years ago, and basically it was a way to take those commissions, and put them into a foundation, and then give them back to different organizations that we are passionate about, and what we try to do is basically have every broker here that's passionate about something, whether, they might be on the board of something, or they might be passionate about a certain, research place or cancer or whatever the case may be. I want what we're donating to be stuff that we're all collectively passionate about, and like one of the things that we do every year is we do this Christmas gift deal for like the single mother's neighborhood that's up in Oklahoma. Well, one of our brokers, she grew up in that neighborhood, right? She had a personal connection with that, right? And so, we now load up a big old U-Haul with a ton of presents, and we brighten the days of all these families, that are less fortunate, and I mean, there's a variety of other ones, veterans, children, cancer research that we donate to. My goal is to try to start, I'm going to try to have a massive gala here at DFW later this year, which you guys are going to be invited to. And you're going to be able to dress in Western attire. So you'll have to get your cowboy hats and boots. And I'm going to probably have it over in the Fort Worth stockyards. And the goal is to raise a bunch of money, for the foundation that's then going to get back to different charitable causes. We're going to have a big band and a big, banquet hall that we're going to put it in. And I've got numerous, commercial real estate companies that have already said, we want to sponsor it. And, and several hundred of people who've already said, I'm in, from all over. And that's just how crazy social media, we haven't really even touched on that, but social media has kind of changed my life over the last, 4 to 5 years.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and we'll certainly be there if when we get the invite.
Yeah, man.
But turning a little bit to the real meat of our conversation, you talked a little bit about DFW, your perspective on the market there. Turning to the rest of the U.S., what do you think are the big kind of key trend drivers? You mentioned that your goal is to expand outside Texas, perhaps even into some other markets. What do you think those next kind of big markets are going to be? What are you thinking?
Well, and this kind of goes back to a lot of the capital folks that I talk to. I mean, I'm big kind of on what they call the smile or the sunshine states, right? Kind of the South and up to the Carolinas and even over to California. I don't know if I'd personally put money in California. Nevada, yeah, maybe as well. But, I mean, listen, my whole deal is if there's ever the right people out there, I'll look at expansion of opening up more Paladin offices, but right now I'm more focused on, trying to grow Paladin with great people, putting together a lot more kind of principal and development type deals, with different either family office or institutional capital. And so that might eventually take us to other states. But, I mean, you look at the phenomenal things that are happening in Florida, you can't ignore, anywhere that's having a positive net migration in this country, you can't ignore why you would not want to invest in real estate in those areas, whether that be multifamily, industrial, even the ugly duckling today office, right? I mean, it works in the right locations. And retail, as much as retail gets kind of bashed on, retail in general is doing really well because they haven't developed any new retail in the last 5 to 10 years, right? Because retail, everybody's been talking about e-commerce is taking over. And so retailers have shrunk, right? And all those other things, but they also haven't been building a ton of power centers. And because of that, you have low availability. And actually for the first time now, you're seeing, a lot of lease rate appreciation on the retail sector. And so, to me, that's, if I'm placing money or I'm looking to expand, it's kind of in those areas that really have positive net migration. That's where I'm looking.
And turning specifically to industrial, are there any subsectors within industrial that you see either outperforming or underperforming in the coming years, whether that be, manufacturing, distribution, or, iOS has gotten a lot of attention recently as well.
Yeah, iOS has gotten a lot of attention. I think there's certainly a need there. I think it's gotten more attention because it's gotten institutionalized for the first time over the last few years, right? It was very much a lot of stuff that was owned by mom and pops, right? And now all these institutional capital players have been jumping into that space and gobbling up. And listen, I think a lot of them could be great land sites eventually for new industrial development, right? Especially if they're what I call infield locations, infield or outfield. So if you got a well-located site that's infield, at the end of that lease, you might go, man, this is more valuable for us to go vertical, and build a brand new industrial building on it than just continue to collect rent, from some guy parking trailers everywhere, So I understand the iOS game. I think it got a little oversaturated, candidly. I think some guys probably overbought and the demand isn't quite there. But I know that really depends upon where it is and the availabilities and all those other things. Yeah, I mean, manufacturing's obviously massively happening right now. So the trend for a lot of developers today is to make sure that they have significant power available to these sites, and trying to have that power day one, or at least having more power than your competitors might win you a deal for a manufacturing type scenario. So power is becoming more of a player, I would say, than before, because It's funny if you go out and you talk to these economic development folks, all over DFW or Texas for that matter. 5 years ago, if you asked them, tell me the top 10 industrial transactions you're chasing right now, 9 of those 10 were logistics in nature, distribution centers. If you ask them that same question today, probably 7 to 8 of those are now manufacturing out of that 10, right? So that shows you right there the trend of the onshoring back to the United States. And it just, corporate America never moves quickly, right? And so, I think, and I don't want to get political, but, Trump was kind of the first one that kind of called out China and started incentivizing corporations to move manufacturing back to the States. And so I think I think Fortune 500 started analyzing during that time, right? And then we had COVID happen. And then the supply chain got broke and put a lot of these companies in a pickle. And that really accelerated, okay, we have to move manufacturing back to the States and or Mexico because we can't have this happen in the future. And so I think that's probably the biggest segment that's changing. E-commerce has gone from pre-COVID was about 15% of total retail sales. Now it's roughly about 20 or 21%. So, it rose pretty quickly because of the pandemic, and it captured a lot of generations, the baby boomers and the older folks, that maybe weren't buying online. Now I've realized how easy it is. So it's grown, but think about that. It's still only 20%. Now we know it's never going to be to 100%. You're still gonna go get your hair cut somewhere, right? You still want to go eat at a restaurant, right? So some service related stuff is always still going to have physical locations for the most part, but look at how much e-commerce still has to grow is what I'm saying. What's it going to look like in another 10, 15 years? Are we going to be up to 40% of total retail sales? I don't know that answer, but it just shows you that the e-commerce sector and then the manufacturing, those were two sectors that were not around in 2009 when we had our last downturn. And now those two factors are continuing to fuel this sector, even in what I would call kind of a depressed economic environment, mainly because of Wall Street and the rate hikes, right?
And so if that's how I would say investment and the capital is evolving in the space, have you seen any changes in terms of the occupier needs in the space that are kind of I would say changing the market and changing what owners have to essentially equip their properties with or offer up?
It's certainly evolving, right? The industrial buildings over time, when I got in the business, they were 24-foot clear, right? And they were just starting to build to 30 and 32. And then the trend was to build the 36-foot clear, and this is all because we could get more cubic feet inside of a warehouse in a smaller footprint. So we're actually, what's crazy is industrial developers were smart. They would pay on the cubic foot, not the square foot, right? Because the reality is, it costs more to build higher. There's more infrastructure, right? So, and now the trend is 40-foot clear. And the reason we're going higher is now the lift trucks are more sophisticated. They're more stable where they can go up high. Okay. So now, so we're building buildings higher. We're building deeper truck courts. We're building buildings now with a lot of trailer storage because that's very important. The power thing I mentioned the other day is important. Now Some guys are even insulating, the roof sticker so that, they're staying cooler inside those warehouse spaces. There is a lot of talk about, EV and charging and trying to dedicate some areas of truck courts to, electric charging. Because I think, honestly, the automated car business is going to be bigger in the logistics sector than it is in the home the commercial sector or what have you. Because one, we already have a shortage of truck drivers. And two, we're talking about very long, easy routes, right? With not a lot of turns. And so these computers will be able to accommodate, the 18-wheeler that's leaving the Port of LA and just needs to get out to I-20 and he's all the way to Dallas, right? And he only has to make a few exits along the way. So there is a lot of talk about that because that's going to be real. It's not quite here yet, but I know, it is here, but it's in a very elementary stage, and I know it's coming. So that's definitely going to be something that, are going to have to happen at a lot of your facilities, is having charging stations and things of that nature for the electric 18-wheeler trucks.
So Conrad, we're in a new year, right? We just started 2024. You've already been talking about some major trends you think kind of beyond this year, but what is your forecast for 2024? Do you think industrial performance can kind of continue to ride this wave of the last few years? What do you think? Maybe that's even for DFW or Texas or the U.S. kind of writ large.
I'm cautiously optimistic, right? There's some external factors that we can't control. What's going on in the Middle East right now? What's going on in Ukraine, Iran, things of that nature. Saying that we have a stable international situation over the next year, I'm optimistic that we're still going to have another good year. That because of what the numbers I saw last year, I don't really see any slowdown and any reasons to slow down, and so, being here in Texas, I always say all the time, we're the last one in and kind of the first one out of these recessions. All I can do is look back on my career and say, you know what, 2009 was terrible, and it was terrible for everybody, right? But by 2010, in Dallas-Fort Worth, I was earning the same type of money that I was making in 6, 7, and 8, right? There's a lot of my friends that were on both coasts that couldn't really say that till probably 13, but they were just down longer because things just weren't happening as swiftly there, And I think, when we in Dallas-Fort Worth, we have 350 to 400 people move here every single day. And that number only seems to continue to grow every year as, it's crazy, but literally, like, some weeks I go, wait, did I not see a new headquarters announcement this week? Like, I feel cheated, that's how it literally has felt like over the last few years. We've kind of become the darling of so many new huge corporate relocations or regional headquarters. Goldman's building a huge new campus here that's bringing, I think, 1,500 workers, from the Northeast down here. And so I guess in summary, I'm cautiously optimistic. I think it could be a good year. The only headwinds I truly see out there is the debt maturity of a lot of commercial real estate, not so much on the industrial side, but mainly on the office side. And the reality is all these lenders and capital providers, most of them are all cross-collateralized in all asset classes. And so could, the office sector kind of bring down all the sectors from a valuation perspective because of, all the debt maturities that we have, and I think there's more bank failures ahead. I think we put a little Band-Aid on them. But you talk to enough people, and you guys are in this space. You talk to enough people kind of in that valuation market and guys that track debt and loans. It's a big number. And there's a lot of banks trying to get their arms around it all and figure out their values and what they got. So, I mean, there still could be some choppy waters ahead in the capital markets world. But I just thought we had a pretty bad capital markets world this past year, and industrial still performed unbelievably here in Texas. So I think I'm a believer now that it's just not due to manufacturing and the continued growth of e-commerce and the continued net migration here. I just don't know if I'm ever going to see a really, really huge downturn again in this space.
Yeah, we had a good conversation with Stephen Bushbaum from TREP a few weeks ago, and I think he shares a lot of those sentiments about the maturity wall. And so good to see how these conversations kind of all come up against one another or with each other rather.
Yeah.
But turning our attention, I wouldn't say away from industrial, but kind of blowing it up towards all of CRE. How do you see the industry changing in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years? What are some of the big things? Is that artificial intelligence? Is there something that nobody's talking about yet? What do you think that might be?
And those are people probably a lot smarter than I am, candidly. But I do see the value of AI. I mean, it's kind of crazy, honestly. As a guy who and I was telling the story yesterday to somebody. I post a lot on social media, and I've always made it a fact to always be like me pumping out the internet, like I wrote it. There's a lot of guys who hire robots and do all the other stuff, about data. Well, the other day I was making a post and LinkedIn gave me an option. It's like, have AI write it. And I was like, I clicked on it and I reread it, and I was like, man, that is better than what I said. Right? And so then, I went back and I changed a few things and I added a little more Conrad spin to the article. But that for the first time was like, boy, look how awesome, right? I mean, I can't imagine being a journalist, who has to do that for a living. Like they have to live on AI. Like, I mean, that's freaking incredible, right? And so, you're seeing the effects of AI, boost all these hyperscalers in this explosion, or we're seeing on the data center side of things. DFW again is probably the number 2 market behind Northern Virginia in terms of data centers in the world, and there's a lot of that coming online because of really all this new AI technology that's coming, and self-driving cars, all those other things. So I think it's an important component. I mean, I still think that commercial real estate in general is a very relationship type business. So, I mean, are brokers going to go away? I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe I think I'll be in the ground before that happens, but I do think if you're a broker and you're not embracing technology, whether that's, the leading, having a great CRM system or marketing or using videography or using, social media, which I've hit on a little bit, like you're going to kind of be left behind. I mean, you need to be embracing it a little bit, or, your peers are going to pass you up.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's some of the stuff that we hear too. But, Conrad, we like to ask all our guests kind of the same question. And that is, if you think about all these changes coming to CRE, but some are not happening fast enough, you could snap your fingers right now. Any change to the industry could come right now. What would that be for you?
Jerome Powell to reverse all those hikes that he did back in 22. So if Jerome could just, pick those 7 or 8 he did in a row and kind of at least, hey Jerry, just at least give us 3 or 4, back of those 7 or 8 that you did to us. That's caused a lot of pain in the capital market sector, which fuels a lot of these transactions, which fuels a lot of all the largest brokerage firms. But even let's just look beyond that. Like, I can't imagine being a residential real estate agent the last 2 years, right? Boy, unless you have significantly wealthy families and you're buying all cash, there is nobody trading 3% debt for 7 or 8 today, right? So that stagnation, that was caused, by the rate hikes. And we all know residential real estate is one of the drivers of the economy, right? I mean, everything that sector touches, from lending to title companies to contractors and builders and every piece of material that goes into a house, So do I think we're ever going to get back to where money is 0% like it was? No. And it's probably a good thing. But I think we've got to figure out that happy medium to really get the economy and commercial real estate kind of flying again. Because right now there's just no, institutional capital. It's sitting on the sidelines. If you look at all the capital markets transactions last year, it's really private wealth is the guys who've been acting in institutional capital sidelines.
Excellent answer. And, I would regret not asking you before we sign off here, but you're really big on social media. For our listeners, where can they find you, follow you? Where do you post all your stuff? And where could they find you?
Yeah, for sure. I'm most active on LinkedIn. To me, that's just main from a business perspective. I mean, I'm active on Twitter and Instagram, but to me, those are more like, having fun, playful type stuff. Whereas I truly feel like LinkedIn's kind of the business world. So I'm real active on LinkedIn. I have a monthly newsletter I send out. So you can if you just look up Conrad Madsen, Madsen. I think it's LinkedIn. I think it's just my first and last name put together. I'm pretty easy to find. You can sign up for my newsletter there. You can send me an email. You can send me, whatever. I'll listen, as long as it's not some bot, I will respond to you, But if you send me a link that has a Calendly link on there asking for my time, I'm going to know that you're a bot and I'm probably not going to respond. But if you send me a message, I will certainly respond and be happy to chat and do anything else for you. So
fantastic. Well, Conrad, I think that is all the time we've got today. I do want to thank you for being here with us and to talk all things industrial and CRE. Omar, I look forward to speaking with you next week on another episode of CRE Exchange.